What would you do if you were the president of the United States? Would you remove the cell towers? Would you end the geoengineering? Would you stop the fluoride? Would you stop Fauci and the pandemic? Would you arrest Bill Gates and Klaus Schwab? What would you do if you were president? Even for a day. And what would you do if you were the king of the world? Would you end world hunger? Would you end all wars, all of the misery, and make it a nice place to live? What would you do if you were in charge? What would you do if you were the master of the universe? These are important questions that nobody seems to ask. We've been covering the strange and the unusual for over 10 years, fighting against evil for decades. And you know what we've seen during all of these struggles? Monsters. Nothing but monsters everywhere. We've shown you the faces from another dimension. We've shown you the horrors of this world. And of another world. Many of you have experienced this for yourselves. Some of you have not. But the world is full of monsters. The universe is full of monsters. As Christians, we're conditioned to understand that these monsters are the dark side, the enemy, the evildoers. And as Christians, we have this rosy, optimistic, positive outlook on what's going on. It's going to be okay because eventually we'll get justice. Eventually the evildoers will get what they deserve. Isn't that our expected outcome? Of course it is. We're waiting for the day that evil will pay for what it's done. Like all of the martyrs before us that suffered and were killed for righteousness. But how many of us really know the Bible? Our recent surveys show that the vast majority of this audience, and this is a selected audience, the vast majority of this audience doesn't know what's really in the Bible. And so we're going to tell you what is going on. This is probably the most important broadcast that you'll ever listen to in your whole life, so pay attention. Come back to this broadcast. Now, many of you are skeptics, which is where you want to be in life. You want to ask questions. And when we talk about the Bible, many people have various questions and opinions about what's going on there. We're going to tell you what's going on there. The Bible essentially is the best record that humans have of alien / paranormal experience throughout history, going back 5,000 years, encounters with other life forms, other consciousness. That's what it really represents. And so even if you're a skeptic, even if you're a subscriber of devolution, somehow we landed on this Goldilocks planet, that the DNA just coded itself, that we've managed to work our way around the chicken and the egg problem. What came first, the chicken or the egg, or the primordial soup? Oh, we didn't just land here. We were put here. And I want you to pay attention to what the official record states according to how we got here. We have to go back to the story of Adam and Steve. Adam and Eve. The Garden of Eden. Immortals creating immortal humans in a paradise, a perfect world. Now imagine being two naked people in the garden of your dreams, thousands of years ago. Imagine being like those children. Because mentally, they must have been like children, even if they were gardening for 100 years, eating the fruits. They must have been like children. They wouldn't have been like the streetwise gangsters that we have out there today. Video guys on vacation. And so then comes the snake. We all know what the snake looks like. It's like these politicians on television. Imagine letting in a snake like this into the garden. A pedophile. We've seen the videos of Biden sniffing little children. Imagine letting in a mind like the snake into the garden to encounter little children just minding their own business in the garden. Imagine introducing a pedophile monster into the garden to mess with these little children. What kind of mind does that? What kind of consciousness does that? Now you might be saying to yourself, this is the test these little children. And when they got raped and pillaged by the snake, we're all thinking to ourselves, Adam and Eve got what they deserved. Imagine the trauma of being expelled from the Garden of Eden, the first nights going from light into darkness, being an immortal to now all of a sudden having bodily functions. According to the Apocrypha, Adam and Eve kind of separated for a while. According to the Apocrypha, Adam was having relations with animals, and it just went downhill from there. They never really recovered from the trauma of being abused as innocent little children. And so this isn't really about failing the test. This is about being raped by monsters, essentially. Now you might be thinking to yourself, how dare you? And I'll be honest with you, I'd be surprised to see another day. But it gets worse. When we look at the people that actually had encounters with the master of the universe, the encounters were described as dreadful. Moses, everybody knows Moses. Let my people go. Probably one of the only people that ever had real close contact with the Almighty. This is what Moses says in Deuteronomy 7, verse 21. The Lord thy God is among you, a mighty God and terrible. Deuteronomy chapter 10, verse 17. For the Lord your God is God of gods and Lord of lords, a great God, a mighty and a terrible, which regardeth not persons nor taketh reward. Now, as Christians in the mainstream religions, we have this perception that God is love. Don't we? Of course we do. And many people out there are saying, Jesus is all about love, and they worship Jesus. And right now, Jesus is sitting at the right hand of the Father, thinking about the crucifixion, thinking about coming back to wipe out humanity. I mean, that's what we're waiting for, right? That's what Christians would consider getting saved. They're thinking about the rapture, getting raptured out, like it's gonna be going on a cruise ship. Oh no. Oh no. Right now they're just waiting for it to become like Sodom and Gomorrah, to wipe everybody out. That's what we're looking at. A creator and destroyer of worlds. That's what they do for fun. We're like cattle grazing in the pasture, waiting for the slaughterhouse. That's where we're at. Video guys on vacation. And it's probably going to take a while for the video guy to catch up to where we are in this epic broadcast. You might be thinking to yourselves right now that we're taking things out of context, that this is somehow a misrepresentation of what's going on. How many of you have heard of Jacob's ladder? Do you know who Jacob is in the Old Testament? Later renamed Israel and had 12 children, 12 tribes, including Joseph, who became like a sub-ruler in the land of Egypt just before things got rough and the descendants of Jacob became like mud people, trudging in the mud, making brick all day, building cities for the Pharaoh as slaves. But Jacob and the ladder in the Old Testament is something like this. Behold, a ladder set up on the earth, and the top of it reached to heaven, and behold, the angels of God ascending and descending on it. And he was afraid and said, how dreadful is this place? This is none other but the house of God, and this is the gate of heaven. You have to imagine what he's seeing and feeling in this encounter. But it wasn't a positive encounter. In fact, in Isaiah 45, verse 7, it says, I form the light and create darkness. I make peace and create evil. I, the Lord, do all these things. All of the evil that we see in the world today isn't like some distant enemy. You know, a lot of people say, oh, the devil is running the world. And that's a common conclusion. We're all being held hostage. And the devil's running the show, holding us hostage on this prison planet, and we're just waiting to be rescued, waiting to be saved. I want to take you back to Job, chapter 1, verse 8. And the Lord said unto Satan, hast thou considered my servant Job, that there is none like him in the earth, a perfect and an upright man, one that feareth God and hateth evil? And the devil responds, he only loves you because you're nice to him. If you raped him and tortured him and pillaged him, he wouldn't love you anymore. And so, the conversation continued. And the devil was given authority to essentially take everything away from Job, just to prove the devil wrong. And so we have this conspiracy, this commiseration. We see the immortals, the Almighty and the devil, looking for unsuspecting, poor, innocent, faithful, loving people to traumatize and destroy. Everybody hopes that they don't get Jobbed like Job in the Bible. And this is the mentality that we're up against. We're just like cows grazing in the pasture. We're like entertainment out here. That's what we are. It's like a channel on the intergalactic cable news network. And today on planet Earth, we've released an epidemic. And when you think about the Old Testament, why is Moses saying that the Almighty is a terrible God? Because people got swallowed up by the earth. There's, events that would be similar to the release of a chemical or biological weapon, just wiping out hordes of people. And you think about Solomon's temple. And of course, this is all relevant as Christians because Jesus was teaching in the synagogues, preaching from the books of Deuteronomy and Isaiah. And so, if we think about the first temple, what was it like? Anybody remember their Old Testament, their Sunday school? What was the temple like? It was like an altar with horns, covered with blood, animal sacrifice. If you think about walking into an establishment today, man, it's just blood all over, and they're just killing animals, and they you see the altar and it's got horns on it. What are you thinking to yourself? This is not good, right? That's what everybody should be thinking to themselves. This is not good. And then it's, the most sacred spot in the temple, the forbidden area, if you will, and it's complete darkness. Does that about cover the description in the Old Testament? That's why people would just rather focus on, God is love. Jesus is, coming back to save us after the crucifixion. You know what I mean? And you think about the crucifixion here. Thinking about sending us amongst the wolves like sheep for the slaughter. This is not a good thing. This is not a positive thing. This is the meat grinder. Then, of course, there's the very famous Genesis chapter 6, verse 4. There were Nephilim in the earth in those days, the fallen ones. And also after that, when the sons of God came in unto the daughters of men, and they bare children to them, the same became mighty men which were of old, men of renown. A lot of people think that Jesus was an only child, but he had many brothers and sisters, not only during his earthly ministry, but also in this other world. And in Genesis chapter 6, we get this impression that we've got all of these evildoers coming onto the planet, the children of God, and they're just messing everything up. Now, have you ever had, like, neighbors where all of their children were messed up, just rowdy, broken home for whatever reason? And you're like, oh, well, those people just aren't up to any good. And so what does that tell us when you have the children of God coming onto the planet and just messing everything up? And it's just like the Garden of Eden all over again. A lot of people, associate the snake to the devil. We don't really have a confirmation of that in the Old Testament. It's just a common understanding. But eventually the devil does show up. One of these angels, one of these sons of God, right? In total rebellion, we, assume, goes Hunter Biden, and the rest is history. The devil essentially is a family matter. And so all of a sudden we should be realizing that we're really in a bad situation as people on this planet. Whatever's going on out here, it isn't the representation of a good and nice consciousness. Whatever's going on here is the product of a sick and twisted mind, releasing rapists and monsters and pedophiles on innocent little children, and then blaming the children, blaming humanity, wiping them out because of the corruption caused by these immortals. And we have a firm understanding that we're talking about some type of advanced civilization. I mean, a lot of people think that we're talking about the world being 5,700 years old since the Garden of Eden, plus 6 days, and that's it. But the real story is much, much older than that. We're dealing with a monarchy that's spanning perhaps billions and trillions of years. We don't even really know. How deep this rabbit hole really goes. And so, talking about all this with an audience that, for the most part, just worships Jesus, really isn't going to understand what we're talking about here. Jesus was not into self-worship, and in fact, Jesus was telling us to follow the commandments, worship God. He'll be there at the right hand of the Almighty, waiting for justice after the crucifixion. So a lot of people really can't understand what's really going on out there. They're saying their prayers to Jesus, but I don't think Jesus is coming to help you. Personally. Because things are out of control. I've been dealing with spiritual warfare in a very hardcore sense for over a year now. And what I've seen personally is nothing but monsters. Thousands, if not millions, of different civilizations. And they all pretty much looked like monsters or the Borg. And there just hasn't been anything pleasant to report on. It's a universe full of monsters. I can't stress that enough. And so this is the nature of the world. It's a monstrous place. And you have to wonder about the good things, the cute things. The cute little babies, the kitty cats, the puppy dogs, the cute little birds chirping out there, the green pastures, the beautiful beaches, the landscape, the stars. You look at all of this, these different forms of beauty and all of the positive things in our world, and you just wonder about the mindset. Who is it that creates little babies and monsters to eat them? Who teaches us to not kill, but commiserates with the devil, with the enemy against us? And so at this stage, you really have to question the nature of the relationship. And we've been preaching for many years about being a good Christian and being sure to spend your time worshiping the Almighty. And you have to wonder, are we worshiping a monster? Moses would tell you, yes, a terrible God. Jacob said it was dreadful. Jacob said, look, you can be my God if you protect me and feed me. And I think that as people of faith, many thousands of years later, looking at the world from the modern perspective with a more evolved vernacular, I think that we really need something more than just food and clothing, which is nice. I mean, if you're going to be on this prison planet, it's nice to have food and clothing. But personally, if I'm going to worship, if I'm going to have a God that I worship, it can't be a monster. I'm not going to worship a monster that sets up little children, conspires against them with devils and reptilians and pedophiles. I just can't really do that. And so, in my opinion, and this is just, where I'm at mentally right now, if we're going to beat these people at their own game, who's the most righteous one walking amongst the earth? What do you think of this servant? If we're going to play games with the immortals that want to be worshipped, personally, I'm at the stage where we really have to be focusing on taking out the evil of the world. That's where I'm at. I can't be worshiping people that hang out with the devil, causing all this corruption and misery in the world. And so, I'm on strike, personally. I think it's important to still be the best person that you can be and follow the commandments and recognize what's there, just so that you're not giving these immortals ammunition to torture you and persecute you and make your life miserable. But there's a real old way of thinking with these civilizations. And they want to be worshipped and revered and respected. And essentially, to gain our respect, then the evil has to be wiped out. I know what I would do if I was president of the United States. I know what I would do if I was president of the world. And so that's certainly what I would pray for at this stage. I think all of us should be petitioning the Almighty and say, if you want to be my God, if you want me to worship you, then, these monsters have to go. They have to go somewhere else. We've been plagued by these monsters, your children, for thousands of years, and they've caused nothing but trouble on this planet. We want them to go. Take your monsters someplace else. I think that's all we can really say at this stage. I think that's where everybody should be, personally, in their mindset. And I don't think most of you are going to get there. Be quite honest with you. But we've been showing you these monsters in various forms for many years, and what I can tell you in the most honest terms possible, being in the front lines, in the trenches, fighting this evil in ways you can't even imagine. There's nothing but monsters out there. The creator of the heavens and the earth is also the creator of monsters and dirt. The creator and destroyer of worlds. Who would rather blame us than his evil children, like the devil. And so personally, I'm tired of being blamed for what this spiritual wickedness from heavenly places is doing and suffering the consequences of it. Exposing innocent little children in the Garden of Eden to the mind of the snake was probably a little extreme. And, look, everyone should be saying the Almighty knows best. And we don't really know what they were cooking in the Garden of Eden. But obviously everything that's happened so far is part of our destiny. We were destined to come all this way to be assimilated by the Borg and the beast system. And there's a lot of talk of some of the most futuristic aliens being human-like cyborgs from the future. And this really brings us back to the chicken and the egg problem. Those that would argue that the angels are cybernetic robots. And there's a lot of people that say that, believe it or not. Well, where did these robots come from? Well, when we see them on television, the Westworld robots, we're not saying they're the real, authentic angels, if you will, but perhaps just replicas. In any case, or fallen, cyborgs. Where did these robots come from? How do you get robots without the first humans? And that's certainly one rabbit hole to explore. But we've seen some real spiritual wickedness, like phantoms. Not just, some of these other EMF life forms that we've been talking about. There's just no telling where these people come from. Where these immortal humans from another universe come from? We don't know. But it seems like their children are wicked, up to no good. They've caused a lot of problems here on Earth. And none of them want to fess up to it. Really. I mean, we're told that this has happened, but nobody really picks up on it. A lot of people think Nephilim and demons and giants, and where do you think these sons of God came from? They left their first estate. They defiled themselves with women, and their offspring became, demons after the flood. They keep coming back to haunt us. And you have to wonder what's really going on, because the New Testament tells us we keep coming back. Even Jesus, after the resurrection, in the Bible it says he looked different. Elias, John the Baptist, they come back in different people. I mean, do we just get recycled on the planet? Is this paradise? Is this everlasting life for the human species? What's really going on? Right now we're all being targeted by technology that is light years ahead of modern times. Most people don't even know that they don't even know. And so it just feels like we're cattle grazing in the pasture. But until these immortals get their act together and take away this evil that they've brought upon our world, I'm just going to be a Jedi fighting the dark side. And call me Ron Skywalker Johnson. Until then. If you're listening to this, you are the Resistance.